بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولا شبيه ولا مثيل له ولا ضد ولا ند ولا جسد ولا صورة ولا أعضاء له. كان الله ولا مكان، فهو الآن على ما عليه كان. فلا تضربوا لله الأمثال، ولله المثل الأعلى. تنزه ربي عن الجلوس والقعود وعن الحركة والسكون وعن الاتصال والانفصال. لا يحل فيه شيء ولا ينحل منه شيء ولا يحل هو في شيء، لأنه ليس كمثله شيء. مهما تصورت ببالك فالله لا يشبه ذلك. ومن وصف الله بمعنى من معاني البشر فقد كفر. وأشهد أن سيدنا وعظيمنا وقائدنا وقرة أعيننا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله ونبيه وصفيه وحبيبه وخليله، أرسله الله هدى ورحمة للعالمين، هاديا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه سراجا وهاجا وقمرا منيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وأعظم وأنعم وأكرم على هذا النبي الكريم سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين، كلما ذكره الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا عظيم الجاه. I praise Allah, I glorify Him, and I thank Him for all the blessings that He gives without Him being obligated to give anything. And I ask Allah to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and to protect his Muslim nation. I testify that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, the one without a partner, the one without an equal, the one without a similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe, and nothing in the universe is like him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because he is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne, and he is not attributed with fatigue like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non Muslims attribute to him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah does not resemble that, and whoever attributes an attribute of the creations to Allah is outside of Al Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah and his final prophet and messenger, sent to all humans and jinn, and he is truthful about everything that he conveyed of the revelation. Thereafter, remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending this session of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get reward for that good deed. The reward is defined as the compensation that the Muslim receives in the hereafter for the good deeds he did in this life among what makes him happy. An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise will be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only and not the praise of the people. So, Alhamdulillah, that Allah Ta'ala has enabled us to do this good deed. The good deed of acquiring the knowledge of Islam, and particularly the good deed of acquiring the personal obligatory knowledge of Islam. Because without the personal obligatory knowledge of Islam, the Muslim would never be able to achieve piety. What is piety? Piety is defined as fulfilling all the obligations and refraining from all the sins, also known in Arabic as at-taqwa. At-taqwa, it means to fulfill all the obligations and to refrain from all the sins. And there's no way to achieve that except after learning the personal obligatory knowledge about Islam, as is outlined by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the confirmed hadith, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. This hadith, it says, seeking the personal obligatory knowledge about Islam is a personal obligation upon each and every accountable Muslim. So alhamdulillah, the Muslim who has this knowledge, then he is able to implement it, and he is able to achieve piety if he applies that knowledge. And so by achieving piety, then that Muslim, he would have the guaranteed enjoyment, the guaranteed mercy, and the guaranteed safety in the hereafter, which is obviously that should be our goal. In terms of priority, when we prioritize our lives, the number one priority is to achieve the acceptance of Allah. The number one priority is to reach a state or situation in which we are accepted by Allah. And the only way that that can occur is through fulfilling the obligations without exception, fulfilling all the obligations, and refraining from all the sins without exception. And so, if the person is ignorant about what those obligations are, or if the person is not aware about how to fulfill those obligations, then that person will not be able to be pious. If the person doesn't know, for example, what are the invalidators of the prayer, what are the integrals of the prayer, what are the conditions of the prayer, what are the invalidators of wudu, what are the conditions of wudu, what are the integrals of wudu, then how can he be sure that he's doing it right? And for every single act of obedience and worship, these exist: integrals, conditions, and validators. So if the person is not aware about how to do it, then how can they be sure that they're doing it correctly? And the Muslim, he is not allowed to throw caution to the wind and say, hopefully I'm doing it okay. Hopefully I get it right. Hopefully it'll be accepted. Because we are, the reason that this isn't, it's invalid to do that. The reason it's invalid to do that is because we are commanded to go according to cause and effect. So there are reasons, causes, there are means to an end, and the universe was created, and that rule, that fundamental rule, is part of the universe, part of the character of the universe, characteristic of the universe, part of the attributes of the universe, is that there is the law of cause and effect. Meaning, if the means to the end are not there, then usually, normally, the result will not occur. So, without knowledge, without having the knowledge, the Muslim, he will remain ignorant and he will not be able to achieve piety, no matter, for example, how many supposed prayers he thinks that he's doing, and no matter how uh, many days supposedly he thinks that he is um, fasting, or no matter how much he supposedly is donating. And this is something that is true throughout every time period and throughout every century, throughout every era, is that in order to be a successful Muslim, you need to have the knowledge. In order to be a successful Muslim, you need to know what you're doing. And especially in our times right now, there's a lot of things happening. And if you are not educated, if you don't know what you're doing, then it's possible, very possible, very likely that you might harm yourself and others while you were intending to do something good. So be very careful with things now. Originally, we should be careful, anyways. In the first place, we should be careful because it's our souls we're talking about here. our position in the hereafter, our standing in the hereafter, in the afterlife, which is an everlasting existence. It doesn't end. So we cannot risk our position in the hereafter, and it would be reckless for us to throw caution to the wind with regards to forever, which is the afterlife is forever. So it would be counterproductive, reckless, foolish for us to throw caution to the wind with what would result in our standing in the hereafter. So right now, what we want to do is we want to be sure that every step that we take is a step that is on the straight path, and the straight path is known. As-siratul mustaqim. It's known. The straight path is known. What is that path? That path is the path of al-Islam. And in order to for the Muslim to be successful, he has to know. He has to have knowledge. He has to know the personal obligatory knowledge. For example, this is the first step. And then after that, if he wants to expand and he wants to delve and go deeper into different sciences, different Islamic sciences, then he may do that. And that knowledge is available. And that knowledge will remain among us, amongst the Muslim nation, as long as we have Muslims that are alive. That knowledge will remain present. So, Alhamdulillah, that we have been specified. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah that we have been among the people on earth that are specified to be able to get this knowledge, that are specified to be among the people that are able to have the clarity, that are able to have the answers, that are able to have the certainty, that are not taken away by confusion or ambiguity or vagueness, that we could see through the fog. We can see through the darkness. We can see through the distractions. We can see through the fake. There's a lot of fakeness out there right now. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now. There's a lot of misguided groups that are trying to take advantage and capitalize on the emotional situation to try and propagate their misguided ideas, to try and support or gain support for their misguidances. And we, as educated Muslims, we have to remain steadfast on what is correct. And that will become more and more clear as you gain more and more knowledge. But remember, regardless of what happens to us in this world, so number one, most important thing is to obey Allah. Having the correct creed is number one. Having the same creed as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, having the same belief as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's number one. Number two is the prayer. That's the second best obligation, the 5 daily prayers. So if you can focus on those two, making sure that the creed that you have is the same creed as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and making sure that you know how to do the prayers, then once you master that, you can go in deeper into other things. You can uh, expand. But how are you going to, let's say, be a hero for this nation if you don't have the proper knowledge in the creed, if you don't have the proper knowledge in how to do the prayers? Would you would a person seek to be, let's say, considered a hero from the outside perspective, but in the hereafter they would be a loser? Is that the goal? That doesn't make sense. That's not hitting the objective. Hitting the objective is to be a winner in the hereafter. And the way to be a winner in the hereafter is by being an obedient Muslim. And in order to be an obedient Muslim, you have to have the knowledge. All right, so we said that we're going to start with this case here, talking about the inhibitive matter. And we gave a brief breakdown and introduction to this case. And it's a simple case, really. So this case, what is it? It's very simple. Basically, there are certain things that if they happen to the person, they won't be able to pray. So there's certain issues that if they occur, if they happen, that Muslim can't pray. So one of the most common ones that is easy to understand, which we're going to use as an example, so that the case can be understood, is menstruation. So when a woman gets her period, now once her period starts, she is no longer able to pray. Meaning that even if she supposedly did the actions of wudu, and even if she stood facing the qibla, and even if she said Allahu Akbar, and even if she recited Al Fatiha, and even if she bowed, and even if she straightened up, and even if she prostrated, it wouldn't be counted. It wouldn't be counted as a prayer, and it would be sinful. Why would it be sinful? Because the religion has judged, because in the rules of the religion, it's judged that it's invalid, and to commit an invalid act of worship is sinful. To engage in an invalid act of worship is sinful. So this is what it means, an inhibitive matter. An inhibitive matter means something that makes it so that that person, he is no longer, he is not qualified or eligible to pray religiously, Islamically. He wouldn't be eligible to pray. So what happens if that happens? And there was a time that was sufficient to perform the prayer if that time passed. So that's what we're going to explain right now. It says, if an inhibitive matter, such as menses, occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer has passed, since the setting in of the prayer time, or if an inhibitive matter occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer and its purification has passed, in the case of the one afflicted with a matter such as incontinence of urine, one must make up that missed prayer. Okay, so what does that mean? Very easy. First case is the regular case, the one that would apply to the majority of people, which is the norm. You have a woman who, let's say, the Dhuhr time started. 15 minutes after the Dhuhr time began, she got her period. So now she can't pray. Now, even if she wanted to, she can't get up and do the Dhuhr prayer. Why is that? Because she got her period. And how long is her period going to stay with her? Her period is going to stay with her, let's say, 7 days. So her period stays with her for 7 days. Okay. Now, once her period is over, right, she can pray again. Okay. So what happens to that Dhuhr prayer that when she first got her period? Does she have to pray it, or does she not have to pray it? In this scenario, in this case, she does have to pray it. Why? Because the amount of time that passed before she got her period, once the prayer time was in, right? The prayer time came in. How much time passed? 15 minutes. Are those 15 minutes enough time for her to do the Dhuhr prayer, the minimum of the Dhuhr prayer? If the answer is yes, then she has to make it up. If the answer is no, then she doesn't. So when we say, did enough time pass for her to perform the prayer, it means that enough time passed for her to perform the minimum of the prayer. So what does that mean, the minimum? It means the integrals. So for example, Allahu Akbar with the intention, uh, reciting Al-Fatiha, bowing, rising from bowing, prostration, sitting, prostration, standing, like that all the way up until the final rak'ah, and saying the minimum tashahhud, and saying the minimum as-salatu ala nabi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and saying assalamu alaikum. So without any of the sunnah recommended matters of the prayer, without any of the sunnah dhikr, without any of the sunnah things of the prayer, just the minimum amount. How much time does it take to do that? Let's hypothetically say that it takes 4 minutes to do that for a four rak'ah prayer, for the dhuhr, for the asr, for maghrib, for isha. It takes 4 minutes to do the minimum of the prayer. So in our hypothetical scenario, if the Dhuhr time came in, right? It just came in. And then 1 minute after the Dhuhr time came in, she got her period. What happens? We say, did enough time pass for her that she is able to do the prayer? And the answer is no, because we said, hypothetically, it takes 4 minutes to do the minimum of the prayer. So that means that when her period's over and she's able to pray again, she does not have to make up the Dhuhr prayer because not enough time passed once the time was in before she got her period that it would be enough for her to do the prayer. So when she's off her period, she's not obligated to do it. So basically, Dhuhr time came in. A minute later, she got her period. So that means what? That means she doesn't have to pray that prayer because not enough time passed. That is enough for her to do the prayer. So that's the normal case. That's the regular case. That's the usual case. Now, the unusual case, or the case that is not as common, it goes back to a certain situation that some people have, a certain health situation, which is that they, in their situation, their health situation, they have a medical condition that basically urine is constantly dripping out of them. So this condition is called incontinence of urine, right? And this is just one example. There's many different medical conditions that fit under this case, but we're going to use incontinence of urine as an example. So the person who has this medical condition, incontinence of urine, where they have urine constantly dripping out of them, may Allah protect us from such a medical condition. So this person, basically, they have a special situation when it comes to purifying themselves, when it comes to getting ready to pray, because they're still obligated to pray. These people that have the incontinence of urine, they're still obligated to pray. However, there's certain things that they have to do that are specific to them that other people don't have to do because of their medical condition. So among those things is that the person that has incontinence of urine is that they have to wait until the prayer time starts before they can do their process that allows them to pray, before they can do the process of washing themselves, cleaning themselves, bandaging the area or stuffing the area with something that dries, and then after that they do something like the wudu with a specific intention of allowing them to pray, and then immediately they go into the prayer, right? So their process is basically that they have to, let's say, wash the area, and then they have to put something like a bandage or a cloth or paper that allows them to, I guess, lighten the contamination. And then after that, they start making wudu. What does that mean? They start making wudu. They do the same washing. They wash the same parts and the same action as they normally would, except that they would have the intention that they are making the prayer valid. Okay, so that's one of the differences. And then immediately they start the prayer. So they can't, for example, lag and wait and decide to hang out for like 20 minutes and then do the prayer. No, they have to immediately, after they do that process, they immediately have to busy themselves with what is related to the prayer. So, for example, if the man wants to wear a turban, he puts on a turban so he can pray. He gets his prayer rug, he puts his prayer rug down. He gets his perfume, he puts his perfume on. He uses the siwak, etc. All that are actions that are related to the prayer. So if he wants to do those things, he can do those things. But to busy himself with something that is not related to the prayer, then he cannot do that because he has incontinence of urine, and this is the process that he has to do. He has to lighten the impurity. He has to, let's say, bandage it or stuff it with something that absorbs the impurity, then he has to do the wudu in that specific way. Then he has to immediately start the prayer. He can't wait around. So, because that is his case, when it comes to an inhibitive matter occurring to him, we take into consideration the time that it would take him to do that purification process. So instead of, let's say, 4 minutes, which is the minimum time to do the prayer, we say, let's say that process takes him 5 minutes. So instead of just being 4 minutes that we take into consideration for the prayer time to begin, we would take into consideration an extra 5 minutes because he has to do that purification process. So basically, that means that the one who has incontinence of urine, if the prayer time starts and then 4 minutes later, that person, for example, she gets her period, does she have to pray the Zuhur prayer? No, because 4 minutes is not enough time for her to do her purification process so that she can pray for the incontinence of urine and to do the prayer. So for her, when the prayer time comes in, and then 4 minutes later, her period started. So now she's not able to pray. After her period is over, she doesn't have to make up that Dhuhr prayer because not enough time passed that would be enough for her to do the purification process and the prayer. So that's for the case of someone who has that specific medical condition, like incontinence of urine. And so that's how they would gauge that, and that's how they would handle that. So is that first case clear before we move on to the second case? Just type clear in the chat. All right, alhamdulillah. Now we're going to go to the second case, which is if the inhibitive matter ends. So we're going to use the same scenario where the woman gets her period. So, like we said, the Zuhr time came in, and a minute later, she got her period. So she knows, because she learned the knowledge, she knows that this is not enough time to pray for me to pray Zuhr. So that means that I don't have to make up this prayer. Okay, so that she bleeds for 7 days. So then on the seventh day, right, when her blood stops, when is it that her blood stops? Her blood stopped, she stopped bleeding, let's say 10 seconds before the Dhuhr time ended. Oh, that's a short time, 10 seconds. So what do we do in this case? The author said, if the inhibitive matter ends and there was enough time left of the prayer time to say Allahu Akbar, one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable. So is 10 seconds enough time to say Allahu Akbar? Yes. So that means that once her bleeding stops, then, and only 10 seconds is left in the Dhuhr time, for example, since 10 seconds is enough time for her to say Allahu Akbar, that means that she has to make up that prayer. Obviously, she won't be able to do the prayer in this time because it's only 10 seconds, but she would have to make it up. She would have to do it. So a question here. It says, how does she check she stops bleeding? Oh, so how does she check? How does the woman check if she stops bleeding? It's easy. Basically, she uses something like a cotton ball or like a tissue or like toilet paper, and she inserts it into her uh, opening, into her vaginal opening. And when she pulls it out, does she see blood or does she not see blood? If she does see blood, then that means that the bleeding has not stopped. If it comes out perfectly clean, if there's no trace or stain or anything on it, then that means the blood has stopped. Uh, Well, okay. There's another. The other question is not fully clear, not fully blood. So basically, uh, the the colors of menstruation. There's different colors. It's not always, let's say, like dark red or bright red. There's different colors, but as long as you see something that is like a remnant of the period blood, then that is considered period. So even if it's like a little bit, or even if it's like a line, or even if it's like a spot. So the way that you're describing, it sounds like uh, it's just a little bit of blood, not a lot. So that would still be considered bleeding. And the woman, she's not obligated to check, for example, every hour or every single moment. Uh, so she can, for example, like check from time to time. But so let's say she checks, let's say 10 seconds before the hood is over, and she sees that there's no blood. So now she judges that she stopped bleeding. So since 10 seconds is enough for her to say Allahu Akbar, then that means she is obligated to pray that Dhuhr prayer. So basically, what she does, she, finishes up, she takes the obligatory bath, she prays Dhuhr, and then she prays Asr, because obviously she'll still be within the Asr time. Um, that's one scenario. Now, then the author said, one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable. So, what does that mean? That they have to make up this prayer and the one before it if they are combinable. This goes back to a well known case in the books of Islamic law, which is that under certain conditions, when a Muslim, when he travels with certain conditions, like a certain distance and in a certain way, and for a certain reason, that Muslim, while he's in that state of traveling, he has the religious permission to be able to shorten the 4 rak'ah prayer into 2 rak'ahs, and he has the religious permission to pray the dhuhr together with the asr prayer, or the maghrib prayer together with the isha prayer. So let's say that a Muslim is traveling with these conditions, and it's dhuhr time, and he comes to the rest stop, to get gas or whatever, and so he wants to pray. So he is allowed to pray dhuhr 2 rak'ahs instead of 4, and he is able to have the intention to bring forward the asr prayer before he says assalamu alaikum from the dhuhr prayer, and immediately after he finishes the dhuhr prayer, without there being a long gap, he can pray the asr prayer, also 2 rak'ahs. So this is what it means combinable. Combinable means that in the state of travel, for example, you can pray the dhuhr and then the asr prayer immediately after it, and within the dhuhr time, or you can delay the dhuhr prayer until the asr prayer begins, and you can pray the dhuhr and the asr together during the asr time. This is what it means combinable. So if her blood ended with enough time to say Allahu Akbar, she has to pray that prayer that there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar. And if that prayer is combinable with the one that comes before it, then she has to make up that prayer as well. So what's the scenario for that? Let's say that there's 10 seconds left in the Asr time. She checks, she stops bleeding. So she has to pray Asr because 10 seconds is enough time to say Allahu Akbar. So we know she has to pray the Asr because she stopped bleeding and there was enough time for her to say Allahu Akbar. But then we check the prayer before that, the Dhuhr prayer. Isn't it combinable with the Asr prayer? Yes, the answer is yes. So that means that she's obligated to pray Dhuhr also. And like that, that's how the rule is. So let's say that for Isha, 10 seconds before Isha is over, She sees that her blood stopped. Is 10 seconds enough to say Allahu Akbar? Yes. So we know that she has to pray Isha. Then she checks before the Isha is what? Maghrib. Is Maghrib combinable with Isha? The answer is also yes. So now we know that she has to pray both Maghrib and Isha. So an example where the prayer is not combinable is, let's say that there's 10 seconds left in the Fajr prayer, the Subh prayer. There's 10 seconds before the Subh, the Fajr prayer is out, and she stops bleeding. Is 10 seconds enough for her to say Allahu Akbar? Yes. So that means she has to pray the Subh prayer. What's the prayer before the Subh prayer? The Isha prayer. Is the Isha prayer combinable with the Subh prayer? No, it is not. So we know that she only has to pray the Fajr prayer, and so on. So that's how she would determine which is the prayer that she has to do. Now, let's say she notices that she stopped bleeding and there was 1 second left, or there was half a second left. Is this enough time for her to say Allahu Akbar? It is not. So if there was not even a moment, let's say, not even a moment left, then she is not obligated to make up that prayer. Are there any questions about that case before moving on? Is anybody else having issues with the audio? They're saying that they can't hear anything. Okay, طيب. So the author said, hence, it is an obligation to pray both the late afternoon and early afternoon prayers if the inhibitive matter ended and there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before sunset. Likewise, it is an obligation to pray both the nightfall and sunset prayers if there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before dawn. So what does that mean? It means that what we explained. If the person, their inhibitive matter ended and there was enough time left for them to say Allahu Akbar, then they have to make up that prayer time that they were in. In this case, the what they call the early afternoon prayer or the noon prayer, referring to Dhuhr. And they would also have to pray the late afternoon prayer along with it because Dhuhr is combinable with the Asr. So if the person before the Asr time ended, they had about 10 seconds before the Asr time ended, the bleeding stopped. This is enough time to say Allahu Akbar. So they have to pray the Asr prayer for sure. And then they look and check the Dhuhr prayer is before the Asr prayer, so it is combinable. So they have to pray the Dhuhr together with the Asr. That's basically what it's saying here. Hence, it is an obligation to pray both the late afternoon and early afternoon prayers if the inhibitive matter ended and there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before sunset. Another question says, which one do you pray first? You pray them in order. That's the ideal. In the Shafi'i school, it's disliked to pray them out of order. So it's better to start with the Dhuhr first, let's say, and then the Asr. And then, for example, you pray the Maghrib. Because if there's 10 seconds before Asr is over, what's the next prayer after Asr? Maghrib. So immediately, for example, she stops bleeding. She notices she stopped bleeding. 10 seconds later, Asr is out. Now Maghrib is in. She takes the obligatory bath. She prays Dhuhr, Asr, then Maghrib. As long as she can do that uh, without Maghrib ending. No, it's better to pray them in order. In the Shafi'i school, it's disliked to pray them out of order. So if there's enough time, she has enough time. She prays the Zuhur, then the Asr, then the Maghrib. So, and then he says, the author says, likewise, it is an obligation to pray both the nightfall and sunset prayers if there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before dawn. So that's just reiterating what we mentioned. If there was like 10 seconds left before Isha ended and she noticed that she stopped bleeding, so she has to pray Isha for sure. And she also has to pray the prayer before it, which is Maghrib. And we explained that. Any questions about that case at all before moving on to uh, the next section? طيب. Moving on now to oops, the obligations of the guardian. It is obligatory on the guardian of both male and female children who are mumayyiz, that is, the child who has the capacity to reason and discern, to order them to pray and to teach them the rules pertaining to it after they turn 7 lunar years old, and to hit them for neglecting the prayer after completing 10 years. The same is done in the case of fasting if the children can bear it. So, yes, as Muslim parents, we do have a responsibility and we have an obligation towards our children. We are not just meant to feed and clothe and shelter our children because that's basically all that you do for, let's say, goats and sheep and cattle. You clothe them, you feed them, you shelter them, and that's it. No, and you let them do whatever they want. No, for our children, we have responsibilities towards them. We have to teach them Islam. We have to order them to pray. And when they get to a certain age, we have to discipline them for leaving out the prayer after a certain age. So most parents are ignorant about this, and we see the negative effects of that negligence when the children grow up. So the parents that say are ignorant of this, they don't know this. They spoil their children. They feed into their desires, give them everything that they want. And then those children, let's say they grow up, teenagers or young adults, 15, 16, 17, and what are they doing? They're not praying for sure. They're not fasting. They're doing drugs. They're drinking alcohol. They're fornicating. They're getting mohawks. They're dyeing their hair blue and red and piercing their septum and getting 5 piercings on their ear and wearing ripped jeans and following the non-Muslim celebrities and imitating the singers and the rappers and the vile people, and they're cursing at their parents and yelling at their parents and disrespecting their parents, and they're not interested in going to the mosque, and they're not interested in praying or reciting Quran or saying dhikr or learning anything Islamic. They're not interested in that. They're only interested in the dunya. Why? Because when they were growing up, that's what they were fed. When they were growing up, that's all that they knew. The dunya is eating and drinking and sleeping and getting whatever they wanted and entertainment and fun and everything when they were little. So yes, this is another thing that goes with the cause and effect. Is that there's certain things that lead to other things, causes that lead to effects, and among the causes that lead to the uh, uh, positive development, positive Islamic development of the child is the parents' role. So the parents, if they did what they're obligated to do, then 9 times out of 10, the norm is that the child will grow up to be proper, Islamically proper. If the parents fail and they neglect this issue or they just fail in this issue, then 9 times out of 10, that child will be lost and they will be a burden on society or on their parents. Their parents would be very heartbroken, very sad when they see their child drinking alcohol, fornicating, and uh, inappropriate things on the internet, cursing, using foul language, not eating halal, disrespecting their parents, all these types of things. These are all things that uh, result of the neglect of the parents and the failure of the parents to teach their children the way that they're supposed to. So first, what is mumayyiz? When we say mumayyiz, this Arabic term, it means the child who has the capacity to reason and discern. What does that mean, the capacity to reason and discern? It means that if you ask them questions, they're able to answer those questions based on understanding. So what does that mean, that they're able to answer those questions based on understanding? It means that if you ask them something, they're able to answer uh, they memorize the answer and their parents. So one way, for example, is uh, and for example, and then you ask them, well, why do you want to be a doctor? They say, oh, because I want to cure sick, because I want to help people, because I want to cure cancer, because I want to cure this, I want to cure that. So they're understanding what you're saying and they're responding based on that understanding. So that means that they are mumayyiz. And once the child gets to that point, they're mumayyiz. So if you ask the child, for example, what's your favorite subject in school, and they tell you pancakes, then you know that they have not reached the age of mental discrimination. Then you know that they're not understanding what you're saying. Also, another example: you ask the child, how many times a year is Ramadan? So they know that Ramadan is an Islamic month, that it comes once a year. So they say once a year. You ask them, how many times is the Jumu'ah? How many times a week is the Jumu'ah? Since they know that Jumu'ah is the day of the week, they would, for example, know that it's one, etc. So that's how we know if the child has reached the age of tamyiz, if they have reached the age of discernment. So once the child is 7 lunar years of age and they have reached mental discrimination, they have reached mental discernment, then that's when it becomes an obligation upon the guardian to order the child to pray, to order. So the guardian has to order the child to pray. He has to say, he has to order the child, command the child to pray in a way that the child understands the seriousness of fulfilling the prayer. He has to understand the seriousness of fulfilling the prayer. So if the child was below 7 lunar years of age and they actually reached discernment before the 7 lunar years of age, the guardian is not obligated to order them to pray, but it's good if they do. So this is just in terms of defining the obligation. So if the child is under 7 lunar years of age and he is mentally discriminant, mentally has reached mental discernment, is the guardian obligated to order him to pray? No, because he's not 7 lunar years yet. Likewise, if the child is 7 lunar years, but he has not reached discernment yet, which is not the norm, but it's possible. The child is the guardian is not obligated to order the child to pray, because if the child does not reach mental discernment, then they won't be able to do the prayer anyways. They won't be able to do any act of worship because the mental discernment is a condition to do the acts of worship. And when the child turns 10 lunar years of age, if they don't pray, like let's say the guardian, he does his duty, he orders the child to pray, the child doesn't listen. If when he's 10 lunar years of age, he doesn't listen, then the guardian, he hits them for not performing the prayer if by hitting them it achieves the desired result, which is for them to pray. And this hitting is not the it's not breaking their bones, it's not hitting them in the face, it's not giving them a black eye, it's not paralyzing them or crippling them. No, this is a hitting of discipline, not a hitting of taking out one's anger and beating up a child. No, this is haram. This is forbidden. Of course, Islam would never condone that. To abuse children is bad. It's terrible. It's horrible. What this hitting is for disciplinary reasons, and it is only in the case where the hitting would lead the child to obey and to do the prayers. If he would be permissible, then in that case, hit the child. So um, here we see the the true uh, or the true nature or the truthfulness and the uh, correctness of the Islamic law is that it is the just and proper law. And the same is done in the case of fasting. So if the child is 7 lunar years of age and mentally discriminate, the guardian is obligated to order the child to fast. And if the child is 10 lunar years of age and doesn't fast, doesn't obey the guardian, then the guardian can hit the child so that they can get them to fast. And this is if they can bear fasting. What does that mean, bear fasting? It means, for example, the child can fast and let's say not faint. The child can fast and let's say not die. And that's not the same as the child feeling very hungry. The child will get hungry and say, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. That doesn't mean that they can't bear fasting. That means that they have to be patient. They have to toughen up, wait until Maghrib, learn how to control their nafs, and then at Maghrib time they can eat and they can drink. But just them feeling hungry and thirsty, that's not a reason to let them not fast. And remember, in all cases, the unaccountable, they don't get any sin written against them. But here we're talking about the obligation of the guardian. So the guardian, if they don't order their 7 lunar year old mentally discriminate child to pray, then they are sinful. That parent is sinful. The guardian is sinful. The child, they don't get any sin, obviously. It is also an obligation to teach the children the matters of the belief and the rules of the religion. That is, this is an obligation and this is unlawful, and to teach them that using the siwak and the congregational prayer are religiously encouraged. So we have to teach the children the matters of the religion and the belief. We have to teach them that Islam is the only true religion. We have to teach them that no one deserves to be worshipped except the Creator, that Allah is unlike the creations, that He's attributed with perfection, that He's clear of all imperfection, that Allah is not a human, He's not a body, that Allah exists without a place, that He doesn't live in the heavens, that He doesn't live in the skies. That is the creed of the Christians, that's the creed of the Jews. That Allah created a place called paradise, that's for the Muslims, and He created a place called hellfire, which is a place of torture, that's for the non-Muslims and the sinners. That Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best creation, that he's the final prophet and messenger. That Prophet Adam alayhi salam is a prophet and messenger, the first prophet and messenger, and that he came with al-Islam, that all the prophets came with al-Islam. We have to teach the children that, for example, alcohol is forbidden, and fornication is forbidden, and adultery is forbidden, and sodomy is forbidden, and lying is forbidden, and killing unjustly is forbidden. Yes, we teach the child these things. We teach the child these things. We don't have the mentality like some of these parents. I don't know what their mentality is. I don't know what they're thinking, but they think that the proper way to raise their children is to keep them in the dark about these sins, because I don't know what they want to do. They think that they're too young for them to know what fornication is and what sodomy is. They want to keep them in the dark so then that the non-Muslims can get to them first and teach them about fornication in a different way, and teach them about sodomy in a different way, and teach them about alcohol in a different way, and teach them about all the sins in a different way. If you as a parent, you think that you're going to shelter your children, you are delusional. If you think that you're going to be able to keep the outside world away from your children, you are delusional. Unless you're going to live in the forest, fine. You're going to live off the grid. You're going to live on a mountaintop. You're going to live in the forest. You're gonna live. You're not gonna live in a city. You're not gonna live where there's electricity or Wi-Fi or anything like that, and be able to successfully shelter your children. You're not going to, unless you don't work and unless you stay completely locked inside, and you are 24/7 with your child. If that's the case, then maybe you have a chance. But that's most likely not your case. Most likely your case is that you're spending 8 hours working at a corporation. Your kids are spending 8 hours in a public school. Most likely, uh, on the time that they're home, they're on the internet, they're on YouTube, they're on social media, they're watching. What do you think? What are they watching? Coco Melon, Paw Patrol. One way or another, is going to seep in. They have subliminals in those things. They have things like that. So it is not. First of all, it's not following the religion to keep your children in the dark about these sins. We're obligated as guardians. It's our obligation as guardians. We have to teach our children what is halal and what is haram. You have to teach them. Lying is haram, even while joking. Ghiba, gossip is haram. Tale bearing is haram. Unjust killing is haram. Fornication is haram. Sodomy is haram. Alcohol is haram. You have to teach them these things. You don't keep them in the dark. And you also have to ingrain in them the positivity, the goodness of the good deeds. You have to teach them using the siwak. It's a good thing. You have to have a siwak around. You have to use it. You teach them, for example, going to the congregational prayers. If they're a boy, the father, he's obligated to take him to the Jumu'ah prayers. Yes, he's obligated to take his prepubescent, mentally discriminate son to the Jumu'ah prayers. So they grow up in that, so that they are able to um, see and know and have that environment around them and have that habit, those good habits. Otherwise, what is the habit that they're going to have? The habit of entertainment, wasting time, wasting money, always seeking, let's say, some sort of dopamine hit, and not putting any effort into things that require discipline for the sake of their own soul. They're just going to be attached to filling their bellies and watching sports on TV, or I don't know what, Allahu Alam, what these people, what some people, what the dunya people, what they love to entertain themselves with. But if your child grows up going to the Jumu'ah prayers, watching you pray the 5 daily prayers, using siwak, wearing a turban, wearing a kufi, wearing a thobe, this is going to be the culture that is going to be their norm, their habit, because what they grew up. But if you let them grow up with a different culture, then later on you're wondering why your son doesn't recite Quran, or why your child, for example, they are not interested in going to the mosque or learning, and why they're spending 10 hours a day on the Xbox or on the PlayStation or on the PC playing these games. You're wondering why this is the case. Well, I wonder how they grew up. I wonder what happened when they were 5, 6, 10 years old. I wonder. You follow these. This person is still judged as a Muslim. The majority of the imams of Sunnah, they say that if a Muslim, he doesn't pray out of laziness, right? Not denying the obligation of the prayer, he just is too lazy to pray. That the majority of the Sunni imams, they say that this person is still a Muslim. That he's an enormous sinner, but still a Muslim. And if there was a Muslim ruler, if there was a caliph, he would tell him, you have to pray, and if he doesn't, if he refuses, and the prayer time goes out, then the Muslim ruler executes him, and then that execution would serve as an expiation or as a a lifting of his sin, and so in the hereafter he won't be punished for not praying because he would have paid for it in this life already. So it would be a purification for him. And there a minority of Sunni imams. It is a valid position. A minority of them, they said that the Muslim who doesn't pray out of laziness, that he exits from Islam, that he becomes a non-Muslim. So that is also a valid opinion. Um, that is one of the two narrations from Al Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So if you hear that, if you hear somebody say that, then don't discredit it. It is a minority valid opinion in Ahlul Sunnah. Every Muslim is obligated to order his family to pray, and whomever else he can order to pray if they do not pray, because we're obligated to order the lawful and forbid the unlawful. We can't just not. I mean, we can't just, for example, uh, let people not pray if we're able to order them to pray. If we just turn a blind eye, if we just ignore it, then everyone's going to be like, oh, nobody's saying anything to me. I'm going to feel more comfortable doing what I'm not supposed to do. If the person doesn't have any shyness for themselves in the first place, but if everybody around sees this person doesn't pray and nobody says anything, that person's going to be feeling more comfortable to disobey Allah. But if constantly, wherever they are, somebody's like, hey, pray. Hey, why didn't you pray? Hey, aren't you going to pray? They're not going to feel as comfortable disobeying Allah in the open. They might do that in the privacy of their own home where nobody can tell them anything or nobody sees them. But if they're in public and people are like, hey, are you going to pray? Hey, it's time to pray. Hey, go pray. They're gonna feel less comfortable to not pray. And that's what we have to do. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to make us that as perfect Muslims, to make our final words, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. If there are no questions, we'll conclude.